Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse Maurer, and I'm the Worship and Creative Arts Pastor here at Maple City Chapel. I want to welcome you to the Maple City Podcast. During today's episode, Dr. Jay Shetler, Senior Pastor here at Maple City, will be sitting down with Renita Detwiler as she shares her journey through depression. Just so you're aware, before we jump in, there's some pretty heavy topics that they'll be covering today, including extramarital affairs, addiction, eating disorders, and beyond. So let's join the conversation now. Here's Pastor Jay.
Well, we are in a sermon series right now called Not Alone. It's on mental health. And one of the topics is depression. And you have so courageously volunteered to be able to talk about your experience with depression. I'm really grateful for that and looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today. Starting out,
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about you and your family.
My name is Renita, and I'm married to Aaron Detwiler. He's a licensed social worker, and for many years, actually. Another reason this is dear to my heart. I have 3 children. Emma is 21 at Goshen College, and Leish is 19. He's working right now, and Judah is 11, 5th grade in Goshen Community Schools.
Okay. How long have you attended Maple City Chapel?
Let's see. I was born here.
So people who may not know,
Yes.
We're brother and sister.
Yay.
So we both started out life here at Maple City because Dad started the church, and we have a pretty good-sized sibling group, 6 of us all together, who all attend Maple City Chapel,
do.
which is interesting.
It's a lot of fun we have here.
So who is your favorite
No.
sibling, and who's your... You don't want to go there? No, but we do. It is fun to have family here. We just got back from a family breakfast on Wednesday mornings. Every week we have whoever can make it just show up for breakfast and spend a lot of time talking, connecting. So,
It is fun.
yeah, I am looking forward to this conversation, and I love that you're my sister and you're willing to sit down and have this conversation with me. So,
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
well, and yeah, the title "Not Alone" in the series is really to remind people that there's other people who go through this, and so your willingness to share is really helpful. And I know that a lot of this stuff is there's still pain. I mean, there's still tender parts to it. So it is really courageous that you're willing to sit down and
Yeah.
share your story with us.
I did a lot of journaling during this time of my life. And so I was going through the journals, and I had to take a lot of breaks
Wow.
as I went through them because it was just brought up a lot of memories, a lot of, just remembering that time and what it was like. And so, yeah, it's been a long couple weeks getting prepared for this.
Yeah. Well, jump right in. Why don't you start out by telling us a little bit more about when you think of your journey with depression? Where did that start?
I was fairly young. It's hard to know exactly what started first, what caused this and what caused that. But I do remember being about 22, 23 when I first had a family member ask me, "Are you depressed?" And so that's when I really started. I don't know. Back then, you didn't really talk about it, so I didn't really. When I was journaling, I didn't really note that, like, this is depression. But shortly after, I got diagnosed with that. So it was about that age when it really started.
Okay. Can you pinpoint, like you mentioned some other factors too, but what all was going on in life at that
Yes.
time that...
Early on, about 18, I had started with an eating disorder. I think, maybe I'm assuming, but probably when I went to a junior high school, public, we went to a private
schools.
Christian school, yeah. And then when I went in junior high to a public one, I really started noticing doing a lot of comparing, and just immediately thought I was fat. And it wasn't because I transferred to a school, but that's just when it started. And so at 18, when I went to college, is when I started with that eating disorder. And so things kind of just started from there. I began to have a lot of headaches, maybe body changing. I don't know what prompted that to start happening. So a combination of those two things and some untruths, some spiritual things that came on then. And those three things just started with a lot of hardships and relationships. And I moved away to Virginia, so I was away from my incredibly supportive family. So a combination of those things is when I started to become extremely sad and alone, isolated. I kind of forget what you said, what the question was.
But you mentioned maybe some of those, you just said I'm fat, but was there more behind that? What were the lies that you can look back and identify that started, maybe connected to the eating disorders? And by the way, one of the things I love about your story, and we're going to get into here, is depression is a thing in and of itself, but it's often connected to lots of other things. And certain things can cause depression. Depression can lead to other things. And so we're going to kind of weave in and out of some things, but eating disorder was one of those.
It was very big.
And so what kind of, looking back, what were the lies that began to take shape early on?
I think beginning, our family was very focused on spreading the word, and our mission is to save lives. And I kind of felt like everyone else had something of value with that, a gifting, and I didn't feel like I had that. I maybe just was pretty, and that was it, and so I had to keep that. The only way to keep that, that was the only thing I had, was being pretty or skinny or whatever, and so I had to maintain that. And if I didn't have that, what good are you?
So your identity and self-worth really got wrapped up around how you look and your physical. Yeah.
And so that was one way to control that. The only way that I could figure out at the time. So that was the eating disorder, and probably the attention that I needed to get, from people. I didn't know how else, obviously a healthy way to do that. So that was the untruth. You're not worthy. You're not, nothing. There was just a ton of lies there with self-image.
Yeah. So then you went off to college in Virginia.
Went off to college to Virginia. Began to have relationship hardships, eating disorders. And then is when the pain, my chronic pain, my medical issues began to start with, I've always had migraines, very bad migraines, that turned into just pain all over your body. And at the time, nobody knew what that was, so they started with this diagnosis called fibromyalgia. And that was the first time that I was given, probably the size of this, is a bottle of Vicodin.
Oh, wow.
Just back then, this was, end of the 90s maybe? 90s. And they would just hand that
Passing it out like candy. They literally just,
And I vividly remember taking half, and then I would take a whole, and then a whole and a half. And, you just...
So you're in your early 20s at that point.
Mid-20s, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, early 20s.
I have this memory. Did you have a softball injury that affected your migraines or physically?
I did. I broke my jaw here. And so I had to have... I eventually had TMJ surgery in D.C., for that, which was just another, episode of just being away from the family and being alone and having this surgery and just more pills. Okay.
So started with, there's migraines mixed in here. Yeah. There's I don't know. Say a little bit more about, some of that went on for years and years, but how is chronic pain different than pain? Like, how does that affect, how does that maybe connect with the depression? How does that affect people mentally when they suffer from chronic pain?
Chronic pain can be similar to depression in that it's a silent, a very lonely kind of pain. I just remember going to a lot of doctors to kind of figure out things and journaling that, it's in my head. At least I tried very hard. I'm a very prideful person. I didn't want people to know in some ways, but in some ways I wanted everyone to know.
Yeah.
But you want to be tough and you want to be, I can go to work every day and do this, but you are constantly fighting that pain in your head. Mentally you're fighting it. I can do it today. I'm going to make it, and so it's very weary, constantly weary, and nobody notices that you're doing this. Whereas if you just had a broken leg, everyone can see that. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And instead, it's a very lonely kind of pain that no one sees and doesn't seem like anyone cares really.
Yeah, and I can imagine when it's like, broken leg or something, everybody sees it, they rally around you, and then it heals, and people kind of forget. But when it's chronic, like,
never
one, they don't see it, they don't add, and then even if they do, over time, when life goes on and everyone else gets busy, but that just lingers and lingers.
Correct.
You mentioned the Vicodin. Talk more about that. Like, how did that progress? I mean, it's hard to imagine now that a doctor's just going to hand a massive bottle of Vicodin to somebody in their 20s and say, hey, here, take this. Yes,
that was pretty crazy. I obviously didn't know at the time what this was. Very naive to it. Moved back to Indiana, got a doctor, and things started to be like, oh, this isn't quite what it should be. And actually went to a headache clinic in Chicago to try to wean off those. And then...
So by that time, I mean, there would have some addiction to the physical addiction to those, those pills. And
yeah. But I probably still didn't know what I was doing. And at that time, it was, weed would have come in. I would have been smoking that every day, just to get some kind of numbness from this. And then eventually it came back in because my migraines just were still there so much. And I was still getting some. And then it would go into eventually snorting Dilaudid, like just trying to find... you can get these pretty legally, through people. And then it just kept escalating until it was into heroin, and that's the worst thing you could possibly be on to get off.
Yeah. So it goes from something to really treat pain to, without a doctor who monitors it, then becomes kind of this addiction of itself that just wants more and more and more.
Out of control.
Yeah.
And you never think, I think I just woke up one day thinking, it has such control on you, and you just think, how did this start?
Yeah. How did I get here?
25 years later, you're like, what happened? It's the worst feeling.
We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the depression, but since we're talking about this part of it, like there's some stigma around depression and things like that. But drug use is even more than that. So when did you start talking about that with people? How long did you go trying to hide that? You said at first you may not even realize what was happening, but over time, that's part of the struggle with addiction often is just really trying to hide that because of the shame that can be connected to it.
That's a terrible shame. I think, narcotics are legal. So that's kind of no big deal.
And narcotics being the pain medication that you were taking.
So I say that's no big deal, but it is a big deal. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can admit that to people. I would never want to admit that I was addicted to it. I needed it because I had pain. I was constantly saying that to people. Right. I'm not addicted. I need that for my pain. It was not an excuse. But
and imagine it's a mixture of truth to it too.
There is.
Like, there was physical pain.
Yes.
But the long-term use of that,
it wasn't controllable.
To not get too technical, it messes with your dopamine, and then after a while becomes less effective and all that stuff. So it's like digging a hole. But
I was a manic parent, so I would have them, I'd get them this day and then take them all that day, and I was the best person in the world. I had so much energy. It was great. It took away all my pain, and then for the rest of the week, I was down. or, yeah. So that, the hard part, I didn't start sharing about, the hard drugs till later, because that's pretty embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's shameful. Knowing that you had children and I don't know, but to be honest, it's the same thing. Like, it felt like the same thing from heroin to narcotics. Like, they do the same thing. It's just that one was legal and one wasn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
for people who don't know, the reason it goes to heroin is because it's become harder and harder and more expensive to get pain medication.
Right.
And
right.
so heroin becomes
It's just the next
this
step.
very cheap option that fills that physical need for that drug.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stigma of, you're a pastor, Dad's a pastor. It's just like the reputation of drugs is just like, it's not just people that live in a crappy house and you know what I mean? It's your neighbor, it's your friend.
Well, again, part of the reason I was really looking forward to this conversation was your willingness to talk about some of this addiction stuff, because I think that affects way more people than people realize. And some of it is, I just made bad choices early on to use alcohol or drugs and got addicted. And for a lot of people, especially your age, when pain medicine wasn't monitored, some of that was just totally like they just took what the doctors prescribed and found themselves addicted. And it is such a difficult thing to get untangled from. So
terrible.
Yeah.
Worst thing I ever got off of.
Yeah. Let's jump back to when you think of depression. And for someone who maybe, I've never experienced that, like, how would you describe it? How did it affect you?
I would say there's a few main things. First of all, when we say sadness, it's not just like you have sadness, moments of sadness. It is a sadness that just seeps into you, and you are sad most all the time, every day, for long periods of time. Mine was probably 20, 25 years of sadness.
Wow.
It should interrupt your daily life. It does. That's what I would.
Like it's big enough that it makes it hard
to function throughout your day. It feels very hopeless. I remember one time you said in a sermon, this was years ago, but you said the difference between Christians and others is that we have hope. And I remember sitting there and just being like, I don't have that.
Wow.
I don't have hope. And I think you meant it in a different way, like hope for the future or something, But I didn't. I thought, I remember a lot of my questions in my diary was like, what's the point of life? Like, there is no point when you're just every day, just like, why am I here? And what? There's just no end to this cycle of living and sleeping and getting up. And so it's that kind of thinking every single day is the hopelessness. It's you're alone. You think you're alone. You feel very alone.
It's very isolating.
Everything, yes. I had lots of thoughts of death, suicide. You really don't want to live. Maybe you attempt it, but I never did. I just wanted to every day die, wanted to. So you think of it a lot.
And I think that's probably connected to the hopelessness.
Yes.
Like, I often think of suicide as, you're problem solving for how do I fix this depression and chronic pain, and you go through this, try this, and you get to some point, it's like, I'm running out of options, and all of a sudden death seems very inviting. Like death would become the end of the suffering, the end of this cycle, and it starts seeming like
fix
something.
It. Yeah. Which goes into the thought process, like your thoughts. You are thinking 24/7. Your brain is just going 24/7. Whether you're thinking about death 24/7, even if you're just driving on the road and you maybe ran through a yellow light and you're like, man, if I just would have been red and somebody would have hit me, and then you've gone like 15 minutes of just envisioning your death and your funeral and what would have happened. And so this is just constant through your head in every situation of where you are.
Wow.
Just every episode you let your mind wander. And it's usually about death. How could you have died? And so it's just morbid. It's very morbid. I asked my children and my husband Aaron, like, what do they remember about depression, or what did you see? And thankfully most of my children were too young that they have scars from that. But my one son said something about that I was very angry. And so what I do remember is that when you are just hopeless and trapped, like there's no end, I took my anger out. Like that's how it came out. It manifested in my disciplining my children or yelling at them or screaming. I did a lot of yelling. So I don't know, that might be different. You would probably know how some people, if that's more just like they just sit around or something.
Yeah, when I think of depression and the symptoms of depression, certainly there's this whole body experience of depression. It can vary from person to person, but always it affects mood. I mean, you're going to be sad. It can be irritable. Kids especially actually sometimes are misdiagnosed because irritability can be one of the main symptoms of depression. You mentioned that it affects our thinking a lot of negativity, a lot of pessimism, a lot of hopeless thoughts along the way. Did you experience? Did it affect your appetite, your sleep? I mean, it affects our bodies too. So, concentration, decision making.
Yeah, that was the other thing I had. It affected, well, obviously sleep. I'm still on sleeping meds. I'll be on that for the rest of my life. I think.
Still, what did you say?
On sleeping meds.
Oh, okay.
Because without sleep, your body doesn't heal.
Yeah.
So that had to do with some of the chronic pain too. So sleep, obviously, eating. I mean, we talked about that. My eating's just, some people would overeat or undereat, The decision making is, my personality is to make decisions. I am a leader. I like to make decisions, and I'm the first one to tell you where we're going to eat tonight.
So you have your opinions.
Yes,
and
I'm
you
very
make
opinionated.
Quick decisions and.
But during this time in my life, I remember somebody saying, let's go out, go get something for me to eat and just surprise me. That is like the worst thing you can ask someone to do. Like the decisions, just like what to eat, what to, I remember I was at the headache clinic in Chicago and I had written down, this guy had asked, do you want me to change your linens today? And he had just changed them the day before. And I sat there and just stared at him it had to be like a couple minutes, because what went through my mind was like, oh my gosh, is he going to think I have a pigsty if I don't have him change it, Or if he did, it was just like a simple decision, yes or no. But you can't make that anymore. So every decision is just like, you freeze and you have to think about it for 2 minutes. And so it just becomes impossible to just function through a daily thing. And if you're mom or dad or whatever you're doing, like I had to make supper every day. And so it was just like, what do I make?
So many decisions that are required day in and day out, and your mental energy. A lot of people don't realize the amount of fatigue, both physical fatigue, mental fatigue. It affects motivation. And so you just don't feel like doing anything. And it's really hard. Like when you don't have the energy to do anything, people give you like, well, go do this, go do that, go do that. And it's like, it all sounds good. But if you don't have energy, it's really hard to do it.
I would probably want to punch them. They said that. I know my husband used to say that too. He'd be like, why don't you just get up and take a shower? And I'd be like, it's been a week.
Maybe that would be one good question. What is some of the most unhelpful advice you've gotten from people? Maybe well-intentioned, but...
No, they all were well-intentioned. You just personally can't do anything for yourself. So when people say, go for a walk, do these things, you know what they are. you absolutely know what you should do.
It's not that you're thinking that's a terrible idea.
No.
You're just like,
Unless you can get over
imagine getting the
here
energy.
and drag me, or, I'm not going to do that. It's just way too overwhelming to think about getting up and going outside right now. Like, that's just...
I imagine that's part of the pain of all this is when people maybe don't fully grasp how hard it really is.
Yeah, and it's not their fault. I mean, anybody that doesn't understand anything you're going through, it's hard to understand what to do.
Yeah. Can you say more about that alone feeling? Like you mentioned how isolating it can be, and what's it like to go through life with depression and feeling kind of alone in all of that?
I think that was probably the hardest part about it, is that you want so bad for people to know, because you want help, but you don't. At least for me, like, I didn't want people to know as well, because it felt like a sign of weakness to me. Like, mental health felt very different than other diseases to me. We talked about a broken leg or diabetes or something, like, it just felt like I wasn't doing something right. I noticed I talked a lot about almost like it was a spiritual thing. And the things I would do, the verses I would say, the chants I would say, the casting out this, there's a verse in the Bible about when you need healing, get all the elders together and anoint you with oil. And I would do those kind of things. And there was a specific time that I was sinning, like a consistent sin. I was having an affairs, and I knew that if I would just stop sinning, like, this is what is keeping my headaches, like, from being healed. Like, I just knew it in my head. Why. And so when all that came out to my husband and I told him about it, I just fell on the floor screaming and crying, because it didn't take that away. And, I just had that false thinking that, each time I was doing something wrong, I would step away from God and be like, I know this is what's happening. This is why you're not healing me. And, obviously that's not true, and it never happened. So that feeling weak, part of that was connected to spiritual. Like, you felt like a inferior Christian in some way. You felt like if you would just get your spiritual life in order somehow, somehow this should help take care of it. Yeah.
Say more about that. I mean, your spiritual journey. You were a Christian early on. How did, over the years, whether it was the depression, the addictions, like, how did that affect your relationship with God, your faith?
I actually have a journal from when I was just, like 6, 7, and I had a very soft heart for God. I loved him very much. It's really sweet.
Was it you, or was it one of you? You or Roberta left me a note one time.
It was me.
Praying for you. I'm very concerned about you.
He was listening to rock and roll.
Listening to rock music, and
yes,
very tender heart. Yes.
Very concerned about where we were going, heaven or hell. And I noticed that as soon as my early 20s is when I started journaling to God about, why did you do this to me? Why I began to blame him. So I lost trust in him about my future, about if he loved me, became very bitter at him. And so the weird thing is that I kept talking to him. I knew he was there, maybe. I knew he was
It's not
God.
like you stopped believing in him, but somehow he
No.
wasn't on your side, or
Right.
he wasn't trustworthy. He wasn't...
Right.
Yeah.
So that was really started down a very hard, something I would eventually have to turn around, because when you think you hate someone, that, you thought at some point just you were going to have, I think the false thing there was that as a Christian, as a kid, you kind of think like, oh, when you're a Christian, you're just going to grow up and everything's going to be perfect. And then you grow up and you're like, life sucks sometimes. And I just knew that my thinking was that God is so powerful and he's all powerful. Why do bad things happen to people? And, I had to get that. That's not what it says in the Bible. It says that he's going to be with us during those times. But I couldn't see that at this moment. Yeah. It was just like, he's not helping me.
I think I've seen so many times in my psychology practice and as a pastor, I don't think we teach this explicitly in Sunday school, but somehow most Christians pick up somewhere along the way this underlying belief that if we live a good life, trust God, give our lives to him, then generally speaking, things should be fine.
We'll be okay.
And so then when something catastrophic happens, especially, then it creates a spiritual crisis. Like, wait, this was not the contract I signed up for. I thought that this was, and it doesn't say it in the Bible, but somehow we have, and so then it's like, okay, are you there? Are you real? And then, are you good? Can I trust you? Maybe you love everybody else and you're good for it, but something is missing with me. It's not right. And it creates this spiritual crisis. And
Yeah. And so that was really my spiritual journey up till about 5 years ago, is just being angry. I'd come to church, but I would just...
So you stayed involved in some ways, like with church and your faith, and you had this relationship with God in a sense, but it was not a lot of trust, and some of those lies kind of affected that relationship.
Yes, it was very, very one-sided. I would tell him a lot of things, what he was doing wrong. Just didn't think he was there. Although there were moments when, and I would say if there's one theme that he spoke to me throughout that whole time was, I will not leave you or forsake you. And of course, I didn't really care about that at the time.
Just make this
I was
go away.
just like, take my pain away.
Yeah.
But as I stand back and look at it, that's very important now to know.
Yeah.
That.
So that God was there with you in all of that. Say more about, like, was there kind of a key turning point? Was it more of like this gradual? You're obviously not today where you were at, 10 years ago.
No. I would say it was somewhat of a gradual thing. Actually, within the last 5 years, the first step that I did was your wife, Beth, my sister-in-law, asked me to tell my story, which is kind of unique. There's this verse in Revelation that says that we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I think I started doing that back when I was on women's ministry. We did these cardboard testimonies? Something, yeah, which you can look up. But I just am my personality is that of just realness, like just say what you mean and let's get to it. And so that verse I love very much. And so when she asked me to do that to this retreat weekend, I was like, whatever, I'll do it. And then I did it, maybe begrudgingly. But then I began to serve other people and do that more often, sharing my story. And my focus began to be less of me. When you're depressed, everything is magnified. Your problems are just magnified. It's all about you, and every day is just And all of a sudden, some of that just began to not be about you. And it was like, now I'm serving others, and my love for God slowly began to change little by little. I didn't love him right away, but I started to see, as I shared my story, kind of the things that he did that I couldn't see when I was in that place. And I just began to slowly thank him for that and she taught me, Beth taught me to say 3 blessings every night, which I do with my children. I think you've mentioned that up at you do at night too, or end your day with blessings. And you don't think it's really doing anything, but you do that over years.
Yeah.
And it can change you.
Yeah.
It does. So that was just the beginning of it.
So being able to talk about it, one thing, like there's something about talking about this stuff that I think it is like now you're not carrying that burden all by yourself. That there's something about talking about it that helps share that. It's like you're pouring out some of that pain, or and there's something incredibly powerful when other people hear your story and provide support. You don't feel alone in those moments. Like when people really hear that. I know I shared some of my story at different points in my life and expected kind of rejection or would change people, but the support that I got in the midst of that, there's nothing quite like being real and people still choosing to love you in that moment. It's so healing. And
it's
so
a
powerful.
physical healing too. I remember after I first did it, I just went out of the room and just fell down on the floor and just bawled. It was a release that I can't explain. And so every time you do this will be another part of peeling back that onion of just a journey of healing. Yeah. And so it is verbalizing it. And
is part of that like defeating the shame that can be connected to it?
Yeah.
Because shame makes you hide.
Yeah. Oh,
Each time you tell the story, it's like poking the eyes of shame. It's like, I'm not going to let you, I'm going to tell this story.
Yeah, it definitely is. Just every time you say it out loud, I don't think I realized the power I had until I did that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, I can say this out loud, and I can't believe I just said that out loud to people. And, and then people come up to you and like, I have that same thing. And you're like, you do? I thought I was the only one,
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
and they're thinking, I thought I was the only one as well.
Yeah. And so that's why this is important.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. So sharing your story is part of that. You mentioned Beth. I mean, often people play a critical role at some point in kind of helping us through that. Can you think of other examples where people what did people do that was most helpful?
Yes. I obviously having a husband that stayed with you and stuck with you.
Wow.
I mean, if you are having marital issues and then you have to deal with, a divorce and kids and, all that, that would have just been awful. I had an extended family that was just amazing. Supported us in many ways, whether that was through financial or just taking care of kids. I remember one time after Leish was born, I had severe, well, not just depression, but postpartum. I couldn't even take care of him. Right. And I just remember my brother-in-law, Sean, coming and picking him up, and I was just like, there's just so many ways that you can, that people did help with physical things like that. Beth had to call me almost every morning just to get the day started, And that's, I think what makes me cry about all those times is that the longevity that people had to be there. Aaron, through the thick and thin, years and years of just working on her marriage or sticking with us, or every morning, getting a phone call, it's just like people not giving up. On me, even though, I wanted to, it's just constantly being there. And church people, I mean, every Sunday would want to come up. We used to come up during the altar. It was like altar time, and we just came up during the songs, and I was like, why? Okay, Renita, don't go up this time, not this Sunday. It's embarrassing. Don't go up, and it's like just going up there and having people come up and pray for you, or just little things, big things, but little things, it seems like that they would do for you.
You talk about the supportive family experience you had, John, Beth, and others, and Aaron sticking with you. I sometimes imagine people who don't have that, like they don't have family, and the church becomes such a critical, supportive place for people who don't have that, and yet it can be really hard to come and say, well, you said something to me the other day. So another part of your journey is you were recently diagnosed with breast cancer.
Oh, yes.
And you were talking about the difference between, getting that diagnosis, and it's a fairly new journey for you. But how that differed from the journey with depression and addiction and stuff.
It's so that was just the beginning of this year. Was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I had 2 surgeries. It was taken out, and then I ended. That was done for the most part. To me, it was a fairly easy journey so far. But I had a ton. You say cancer, and it's just like the world explodes. My kids are crying, everybody's freaking out, and I had an amazing response from church people, my in-laws in Pennsylvania. Their church. Everybody is just responding with cards and letters, and we're praying for you. I'm on the prayer list. All this stuff, and I think it was just interesting my emotional response to that, because it's been 4 months or 5 months, since January. And my journey with all these other things has been 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And that has taken way more of a toll on me than breast cancer has. And I just want that to be something that I don't know how to do it, because I would never say, will you put me on a prayer list? I am so depressed right now.
Yeah.
I didn't want to tell anybody. And so how do we change that?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that, because you just don't want people to know, and I don't know.
That hit a real emotional chord with me when you shared that, because you weren't at all minimizing the positive response and how big cancer can be for some people. But the disparity between how we often treat physical ailments and mental health or addiction and things like that. And, I can't remember the last time on our prayer list, somebody posted, I'm really struggling with depression right now. Would everybody please pray for me? Or, I'm in the midst of an addiction. And those things are every bit as painful and difficult to deal with as a physical ailment. And so, how do we create the kind of safety where people feel like they can do that? I'm hoping people are doing that in life groups and other places like that. I'm hoping there are spaces where that can happen. And I get why some people wouldn't want to throw some of that on a prayer list. But man, if we could work at making it a safe space here in church where people could talk more openly about that, that'd be incredible.
Yes, we joke about that. Some of my mental health buddies, if we could just walk around with T-shirts, depression, anxiety, or different things. That way we can just group together. But you're right. I think we had an amazing life group at this church. There's 6 of us, and we're not a life, what you would call a small group today, or life group. But we still meet randomly today, and that started, Keith and Brenda helped us start that from our early 20s, just when we got married. So they've gone through life with us, and they mean everything. And we shared our stories. That's how it started.
Wow, yeah.
Shared our stories, so we know everything about everybody, and that has helped.
Well, that's part of the beautiful, if someone like you guys are willing to share your story, it really opens up the door to tell other people, it is okay for us to share our story too. I mean, if they can share like that, then we can too, maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone has to go first.
Yes.
To create vulnerability there. Are there, when you think of things that helped, are there other, did you do things, more of the traditional things people might do for depression, take medication, go to counseling? Were those things helpful?
Yes. My first counselor was way up in Michigan, because you were a counselor. My husband's a counselor.
You worked in my counseling office for a season. You were immersed with counseling.
I was so embarrassed to go anywhere. I went far. I went an hour away. I drove far away. And I remember I just sat there, and he would stare at me. And I was like, I'm not talking. My first one was you have those they call them EAP, employee assistance programs. And I
So
called.
you get like 6 sessions or 12 sessions.
You get like
something
free
like that.
sessions. And so I called and she's like, what, and what was your issue? And I thought, I just hung up the phone. I was like, I can't even tell myself what the issue is. You think I'm going to tell you over the phone?
Wow.
So then my first one with the person was just like, and he's sitting there looking at me, and this was his way of trying to get me to talk. And I'm like, I'm not talking. So, it was very hard. It's not an easy thing. Nothing's easy in this. But therapy is just, I think it's a must. I mean, it is a wonderful thing. You pay someone just to talk about your problems, and you don't have that guilt of a friend, just like, you talk, now I talk, and you discover things about yourself. I mean, it's been so healing to do that. So therapy was very helpful. I know there's different opinions about this, but I am, today only on one antidepressant, and that is huge after that many years. So I did need medication, obviously, at that time. Trying to think what else was helpful. Journaling, obviously, was very helpful to me, but having people walk alongside you that are Christians, that can give you good support, good advice, and obviously letting people in, which is probably the hardest thing to do, is to let people in and tell them what's going on, which ties into what could people do. I think what I said, the loneliest thing is to tell people. Like, that's what makes this lonely, is you're alone. You think you're alone. You're all alone.
Well, and if you're not, if you're holding it in and it's a secret especially and nobody else really knows about it.
Or the extent of it,
Right.
And it just becomes bigger when it's in your head. And I know for a time there, I never went to church for a long time. And finally my sister Roberta said something to me, and I was like, it was like your emotions are uncontrollable. Yeah. So if somebody asks how you're doing, you're just like...
You're going to burst into tears, and that'd be embarrassing, so I'm not going to show up.
Not going to go.
Wow.
So what you actually need is someone to basically just come to your door. You don't want him to, but you want him to. But whether that's like bringing food, saying, I'm just going to sit here next to you, like you don't need to talk to me, but I'm going to sit here, I'm going to clean your house, I'm going to take care of your baby. It's kind of like someone explained to me that when their father died or something like that, like it doesn't help to say, what can I do? Because then it just puts it back on that person to have to think like,
and you might feel like a burden. I don't want to inconvenience you. And
like, I can't make that decision. I don't know what I need. I don't have no idea. So if you just do something, it's better than nothing. And so I think that's what I would tell people, is just, if you know they are struggling, do anything. Write a card, take their kid out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Make a list of things while you think about it, maybe, if you are that person, and just give it to a trusted person so that they can. I remember one time I didn't even know what was going on, but I was very stressed just recently, and my sister Berta found out, so that life group, and maybe it was my other group too, but the next thing I know, my friends, Carmen, Chris, all these people, I had food for a week.
Wow.
And it's like, I don't know. Those are things that I don't have to ask.
You feel seen, right? You feel known in that moment. You didn't even have to ask, but they knew you well enough to know what you needed.
Those are the things that these kind of people need.
Yeah. When there's a lot of research at this point that says, like being out in nature, physical exercise, and things like that can be really, really helpful for depression as well. Yes. And it is another one of those things that it's like, everybody knows I should go for a walk right now, or it'd be good for me to be around people, but I don't feel like it. And I imagine that's another time where having a friend just show up and say, hey, we're going to go for a walk today.
Yep.
Or I'm just going to sit here with you and be company for you, because it's better for me to be here than you be alone. And we really do need people in those moments to help get us moving in a positive direction. And
you might think it's extreme, but that would mean coming to my house, you go get my tennis shoes out of my closet and you put them on me
Put them
if
on
you
my
have
feet.
to, and you get me out that door.
Yeah.
But those are the kind of extreme things you have to do, because I will not do that.
Yeah. Wow. You mentioned something like Aaron sticking with you through it all, and supportive friends. Like, it's hard for family members too. Like, they're going through the suffering to some extent as well, walking alongside. Can you say more about that and what you've learned about what it was like for Aaron or others around you that went through this?
I do. When I asked him recently about this, he said, I felt really helpless. I think I've heard that many times. I felt helpless. I remember in my journaling, I felt like, well, I have plenty of things you could do. But I didn't know how to voice that probably correctly to him. And now that I look back on it, I just feel terrible for him. Like, I can't imagine having a person just cry all the time. And, like, what would you do? How do you stay with someone like that and not become, and you still have to work and, get your kids going and take care of things. But I think what gets me, because this is such a long disease, is loyalty. And I look back on this and just think, if we can make it through the things we did, like, we are gonna, there's such a joy that we can experience now because of what we went through. There is nothing we can't talk about. I mean, we're going to conquer anything. So he said it was terrible. I mean, it was terrible, he says. And I don't know. I would love to, we talked about that this morning at our breakfast, like, get a round table of spouses, to talk about what did they experience? What would be helpful for them?
Yeah. Because it's there are some support groups and things like that for family members of, different things, because it certainly does affect them, and they're trying to be supporters and caregivers, and that it takes a toll there as well. So, I love, when I think of you and Aaron and what you've been through, part of what you've been through enables you to be such good supporters of other people. Like, you have an empathy level that few people have. You can give hope like few people can. Like, and part of it may sound simple, but part of it is don't give up. Like that, don't give up. Don't give up, because when and it reminds me of the love of God. Like, he just doesn't give up.
Totally.
He just doesn't give up, doesn't give up, doesn't give up.
I think that's what, when I was able to step back after all this, and look at it, no matter how I turned my back on him, God, no matter what I said to him, how many times I yelled at him, and, he just was there. Always by my side. And I just feel like that's the theme of this, is like, I tended to, like, oh, I'm sitting here to stay away from him, or we tend to, I don't know, just the fact that he, no matter what, we think when we're bad, we can't come to church, or we don't want to admit this.
Pull away or distance ourselves because
Thank
we're,
you. And just the theme of just, I love you. I remember, reading all this stuff in my journals, and I just went out one night and was just like, I need to be reminded again that you do still love me.
Wow.
And he said, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Just remind you that this was another time, but even during that time, I was with you. You remember that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, okay, I do remember. And, this is just part of what makes me who I am today. Like you said, like, I have a sympathy for people. I have a toughness also, made me get through that.
Yeah, you have a resilience. Like, you can look back and say, I weathered that. Bring it on. Like, maybe you're not going to say bring it on. You know,
no, not anymore.
But you have confidence in what you've weathered. And I think also spiritually, like there is some maturity in your faith. It's no longer like, oh, it's going to all be sunny and roses. And like, no, you've weathered some hard stuff and you still have this trust now in God that is deeper than what it was before.
I have a deep relationship with him, that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Yeah, and I love you're talking about, like, we tend to distance ourselves oftentimes, but the story that draws me to Jesus and to the Bible is the way, Jesus is God coming to us. And so despite our sinfulness, he just keeps coming to us, coming closer. He draws closer to us, not pulls away from us. Our human experience just tells us that people will pull away if we disappoint them, but God is the opposite. He just moves in. He comes in for a hug. He comes in to be close, and so it's powerful. If someone is listening to this and they're just right now kind of in the midst of whether it's depression, addiction, maybe they're having an affair, they're carrying some, what advice would you give them? What encouragement would you give them?
I think to, first of all, find someone and just tell someone. I can't even tell you, like, after I shared, I think the morning after, it was a Sunday morning, we called you and Beth after I had shared with Aaron about my affairs. And that feeling of just spilling that was the most, my burden was off. I mean, it was on Aaron then, but my burden, just sharing that was so helpful and healing. So once you just start sharing what's going on in your life, somebody knows now. And that's just the beginning step. But just
that
talking,
secrecy is like a prison, and until you take that first step of opening the door of the prison and sharing it, it's hard to go anywhere.
That'd be the first step. And just continuing your, or starting your conversation with God. He can handle, like, all that stuff. I think we kind of train ourselves like, I hear a lot like, he can't deal with me, Our sister Renee used to say stuff like that, like, God can't handle me and my disappointment, and stuff. And she's learned, God can. He can handle anything. And he's not disappointed with you. He loves you through this and with it. And I don't think if I went to kept going to him and questioning him and yelling at him and still having that relationship, I would be where I was at. So don't draw away from him. Draw closer to him with it, no matter what the questions were. Or, find someone with guidance about that. But people.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you had said earlier, you didn't mention the way, but I know you're involved with the way. That's another place to tell your story and to serve. There is something that happens when we shift. Like when I think of pain, God gave us the gift of pain to help us focus on ourselves so that we can heal. If you break your leg, that pain makes you focus on your leg. It makes you very selfish. And you focus on that, you go to a doctor, you get healing. But there's times we get stuck in our pain, which means we get stuck focusing on ourselves.
Yes.
And that healing doesn't happen. So part of the beauty of healing is self-forgetfulness. Like we no longer have to be consumed with ourselves. And with some of the emotional pain and stuff, like we have to intentionally start serving, maybe even before we feel like we're ready to let go of the focus on ourselves.
Totally.
And I've seen you do that. I've seen you really, like the way is one opportunity to serve, and you've done it in so many other ways. But there's something about your willingness to pour into other people, to serve other people, that sounds like it's been important in your healing journey as well.
It is so, there are a couple of things that I probably didn't realize what was happening during the time, but putting praise music on has changed my life. Blessings we talked about, thanking God, thankfulness.
Yeah.
You've preached about that a lot. Like, you cannot be sad when you're thanking God for things. They might be the dumbest things in the world, but I have my parents' old car. It still says Mel and Edna on it, and that thing will not stop. It's an old Buick, but I am so thankful for that thing every day. There are just so many things to be thankful for. And nothing changed in my life for my headaches. I still go get, shots or Botox or whatever. Certain things, small things, that I'm doing, but nothing has changed. But my pain is not what it was like that.
Wow.
I mean, it's so hard for me to understand what happened. But my focus no more is like, why, God? Why have you not healed me?
Yeah.
What is wrong with me? What is going on? I don't look at that even anymore. I just think, thank you, God, for this day, and I'm going to put praise music on. And I'm totally changed.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is so we did a sermon series a couple years ago now called Soundtracks. That was all about, it was from a book, but all about the soundtracks. We listened to the thoughts and how big of a role that plays. And that's one of the oldest kind of findings in psychology, is the power of our beliefs and our thoughts. And so yeah, to hear how you've shifted your focus away from certain thoughts to these other thoughts. And gratitude is one of the most profound ways to shift our thinking. And the circumstance doesn't change, but you intentionally shift to look at, and I say that, I don't want to, there's also times of real grief and mourning and sadness. It's not like, just think happy thoughts and everything will be.
That sounds terrible.
No, you really deal with the pain side of things, but then you remember there is this other side of life. And you have to intentionally, I'll talk sometime about ants, automatic negative thoughts. You don't have to intentionally go find negative thoughts. They will find you. You do have to intentionally go find the positive thoughts. You have to go after those and make it a habit to think those. And so
yes, it was very hard work, to do that. It wasn't just like, I'm going to turn on my music today and my depression's gone. It's been years of, that was 25 years
it's like
of
changing
telling
your
yourself,
diet. You have to change your diet over time.
Yeah.
And so you changed your thought diet.
Yeah.
What you were consuming, and worship music is a huge part of that. Taking
your thoughts captive. You're still doing verses and stuff, but you're not thinking there's something wrong with you, or you're sinning, or, you're just not even thinking that way. You're just like, God, blessings, gratitude, serving others.
And it's such a great point that you talked about other people not giving up on you. In the end, you didn't give up on yourself either.
True.
So you kept at those things, and it took time, but you're a different person now than you were then.
Very. And
your thinking is very different, and your view of yourself, your identity is very different. It's been a beautiful transition to watch.
Thank you.
Thank you for your willingness to share your story with us, and I'm sure people will be very encouraged by your willingness to do that.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks again for joining us for today's episode of the Maple City Podcast. You can watch for more episodes coming out on the Maple City Chapel app, and you can also find more information about our church, the events going on, the resources available to you. You can also join us on Sunday mornings at 8:30, 10, and 11:30. We hope to see you there. Until then, let's go and be the church.